Dennis Crowley is the founder and CEO of FourSquare. You all know FourSquare. Let's go talk to him. So let's start back to your early days in computers. When did you first start getting into technology?
Probably early days of high school. So I was really early on Prodigy. We had like a Prodigy household instead of a AOL household. And,
we're probably right around the same age. I'm 34.
Yeah, I just turned 35 this year.
Okay,
so
cool.
were you on Prodigy or AOL?
I used CompuServe, Prodigy, and AOL. I used them all.
Do you remember your Prodigy screen name?
No, I don't.
Okay, all right. So
I wasn't hardcore Prodigy.
I feel like I should get that tattooed right
Yeah,
here.
seriously.
No, I was on Prodigy first, and then I used to have like a video game fanzine, and I used to go on Prodigy and try to sell it, and get kids to send me a buck, and I would send them like a 10-page fanzine, and so it all started with just like trying to do self-publishing online and trying to connect with communities and things.
Did you do BBSs or anything like that?
I did. I had a BBS called Dystopia that ran on like a fax line in our house, and people would dial in and download all sorts of video game nonsense.
What software were you using to host it? It was Wildcat, PC board?
Wildcat. I was going to say Wildfire, but it was Wildcat.
Dude, yeah, I was a Wildcat.
Yeah, with all the ASCII art and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
It was pretty badass.
ANSI draw and all those.
Yeah. I haven't heard that in forever, but I was exactly using that same stuff.
Yeah, I used to subscribe to Boardwatch magazine, like all about BBSs.
Yeah, I used to get the same stuff, and they would review like the best BBSs and whatnot. Yeah,
that was fun times. It felt like community back then.
It did, totally. I've met people that have traced like the lineage from FourSquare to Dodgeball back to like the BBS stuff, just because like I've written about it on Flickr and things like that.
That's awesome.
It's interesting, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we were pretty young back in those days. The internet really hadn't taken off. It was still kind of like, I didn't know where the internet began really. I was like, is it AOL the internet? And then all of a sudden, like, there was this World Wide Web thing, and like, so when did you first start getting into like this as a job? Was it just something fun through high school and college, or? Yeah,
I guess I didn't really get to play around with the internet too much until I got to college.
Right.
And then I started making my own web pages and publishing photos of me and my friends and what we were doing. I guess as a job, I guess it probably started like sophomore, junior year of college, like making websites for people and charging them a couple $100, $500 to do something. And then right after college, instead of getting into like an agency and started working on, instead of making stuff on my own, I went to a research company called Jupiter that was like studying what other companies were doing online and trying to, teach new startups and teach established companies like how to, use best practices and things along those lines.
Awesome. So were you actually a designer back then, or a coder, or what?
I was, in school I was a little bit of everything. So I didn't know how to program, so I wasn't doing anything dynamic, but I was doing a lot of Photoshop, doing a lot of HTML. I used to do a lot of CD-ROM stuff and like QuickTime VR and try to do like all this weird stuff on campus.
Awesome.
So that was kind of fun. But then when I graduated, I kind of, I still knew how to do HTML stuff, but I wasn't doing it professionally. I would do it on my own. I was just like have my own website, and when it came down to starting on the Dodgeball prototypes, that was just trying to having problems that I wanted to solve, and then teaching myself out of a book really just how to do some of that stuff.
Now, no computer science degree then?
No, I took classes. I've never taken computer science classes. I had like an intro one in college, and I dropped out like halfway through. I wasn't good at it. I'm just not very good at math, and I've never been able to compile code. And even when I was back at NYU for grad school, I tried to pick it up again, and I just couldn't get it. And so, mostly just PHP and MySQL, like the FourSquare prototype and even the Dodgeball stuff, all PHP and MySQL.
Now, so Dodgeball was the thing next after college, or?
Well, it was kind of just a side project of mine.
What year did that start?
It probably started in 2000 or 2001, and it was just being bored at work and wanting something, wanting to build something, and seeing a lot of people, a lot of my friends and a lot of other companies start building things. And New York at that time was changing very quickly, and City Search, the big product at the time, wasn't able to keep up with it. I'm like, hey, I can probably build a better version of City Search for downtown New York. And we'll let people add their own reviews and add their own venues. And, that was a big idea at the time.
Back in 2000 what?
This is, probably like 2000, 2001.
Dude, that was a huge idea. No one was thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, but then I was just like executing it at my desk off a little Microsoft Access database with ASP pages. So, it's like, it was enough to get my friends excited about it.
Yeah.
But that stuff like parlayed itself into, early Dodgeball stuff, like some of the stuff we did on mobile, and then into the Friend Finder stuff, and then into what it eventually became before we brought it to Google.
So you were really early, because I remember back when I launched Dig in 2004.
Yeah.
We were trying to convince news sites to have comments on their page,
Yeah.
and they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
They were like, community, we don't trust them, we don't want to, you know. So if you were thinking about this stuff back in 2001, I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, I've got this like portfolio site that I used to get into grad school at NYU. And when you look at, like, I looked at all the projects I was working on then, and like, God, it seems so like revolutionary now, but like then we were just kind of playing around with certain things, like, hey, like small style blogging content, or like, hey, let's put city guide listings on your phone, and let's like hack episodic content onto Palm Pilots, like all sorts of weird experiments. It never went anywhere, but it's nice to have like that, I guess that all those different projects to shape your experiences.
That's awesome. That's rare to see someone. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Is like I took some computer science classes in school, but never. There was always people that were so much faster and better than I was, and so I just hired them.
Yeah,
and I was more of a kind of a product kind of guy. Do you see yourself as like the product person?
Yeah, I think that was my role at Dodgeball, and it's still a lot of my role here at FourSquare. You know, coming out of school, I always had ideas of these things that I wanted to build, like what things would look like on mobile devices, like what things would look like on Palm Pilots and stuff. But you know, I never knew how to build them myself, and I always expected to come to New York and meet like the one teammate that would end up like building a lot of the stuff that I was thinking about, and I just never met that person. And, you know, in 3 years in New York, so I was like, you know, to hell with it, I'll just start teaching myself how to do this stuff.
Right.
And like, you know, I think one of the lessons I've learned is that you know, all you really need is enough to hack together a prototype, to either show it to someone that knows what they're doing so they can take it, or maybe you just get good enough at prototyping that, you know, your products actually do what they're supposed to do, like, you know, 80% of the time.
Do you find that it's difficult? I totally agree with that, and that makes sense to get something out the door, but one of the issues that I had in the early days of Dig is that we brought on some engineers, and this is a lot of my fault, but I didn't know how to vet certain engineers.
Yeah.
And so we had some great, awesome talent, and then we had some kind of mediocre engineers, and it was really difficult. We had issues scaling for many years.
Sure.
You know, you think it's really important to find like a strong technical co-founder then, or like how did you get around that problem?
Yeah, well, we you know, the prototypes. I built a prototype for Dodgeball with Alex, who's here at FourSquare, and then the FourSquare prototype I built with Naveen. And they were still very rickety. And the first real engineering hire was Harry, who was at Google and who was the guy that rewrote our Dodgeball code to run on Google code. And you know, he did that once. He did it again with FourSquare code to rewrite it so it would just be, you know, bulletproof.
Right.
So we were lucky to get you know, really the right people at the right time. And you know, I can see if Harry didn't take all the time and effort rewriting that, like we'd probably be screwed now. But it was one of the first things he did when he came in is look at what we did with PHP and say, this is junk, we've got to start from scratch.
Right. So talk to me about Dodgeball a little bit, because I was a user way back in the day.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Not many people knew what the hell they were doing, but it was cool. Tell people how that worked, because this was quite a while ago. This is like, I mean, I was using probably, I want to say like 2003. Was that right? Was that
yeah?
When,
well, it was.
It was before.
Yeah, I guess
Dig.
we launched it like 2000, really 2004, because it was our thesis project at NYU.
Okay, so
and
it was
then
right around Dig time.
And you know, like the Dodgeball stuff, it existed before then, but it really it didn't really take off until, you know, after things like Friendster came along, and you could explain it in the context of things like Friendster. Oh, it's like Friendster but for cell phones, and then people started to understand it. But you know, the general gist is that, you know, people would use their cell phones and, you know, more specifically text messaging to broadcast where they were at. So you'd send a text message to an email address, which is a nice little hack at the time, and you would just say, hey, I'm at NYU, or I'm at ACE Bar, or I'm at the library, and then, you know, the Dodgeball servers would do its best to match it up with something that we had in the database, and it would then send out an additional like 10 or 20 messages to all of your friends. I didn't even know who you were. So it was like a real simple hack, but it was one of the first things that was illustrating, I think, presence on mobile devices. Like, I'm here, you now know it on your mobile, come and find me. You
were in many ways like Twitter before Twitter was Twitter. Like you were pre-Twitter. It was an announcement kind of broadcast platform.
Yeah, we had like a thing that called Shouts too, and so like people would broadcast messages like, "Hey, I'm going to the movies. Who wants to come?" Or "I'm having a barbecue."
Didn't you have to write like shout : or something? What was it? How
yeah,
did you
like
get
you'd
it
have to do the @ and a venue name, or you would do that would for a check-in, or for a shout it was exclamation point and then a sentence.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah, so I mean,
totally
it was super wonky. Yeah. But yeah, it was you know, those ideas were kind of out there, but you know, like we were so focused on location that I think we missed the bigger picture of what, you know, what Twitter eventually became. Like we were all about, and it might be a a side effect of just being in New York. And everything in New York is about location and the grid and helping people find their way and meeting up with people. And that's just the thing that we were really focused on.
It's funny, when I interviewed Jack for one of these shows, and he talks about New York being a big part of why he came up with Twitter. About like just figuring out where people are and what's happening in a certain area and being able to broadcast that out.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that you guys are. Did you guys spend much time together? Did you get to know him at all, or did you get to see it all? Or?
Yeah, I know him a little. Well, I know him from some of his work at Twitter and from Square. He's an angel investor in FourSquare. And so we've as you are.
Yep.
And we've overlapped a bunch of things, and he's just brilliant in product, and he's doing a great job with the stuff he's working on now. So.
Awesome. So you're growing like crazy. One of your guys said you're like 70 people now.
Yeah, it might be 75 if you want to count all the interns out of here too.
That's insane.
We're running out of space here at our fabulous New York headquarters.
That's awesome. So tell me, where are things like? Where do you see the future going? Like, what's the next couple of years look like for you?
Yeah, so, we're really excited about the stuff that we're going to be able to do with next generation phones, and I feel like a lot of what we've been doing in the past with FourSquare is just setting up the move so we can execute, like when phones are a little bit better with GPS, when they're a little bit better with battery, when you can run queries in the background, when your phone can kind of come to life and let you know about like what's happening on the street that I'm walking by, or what's to do in the city now that the plane has landed. And so taking advantage of some of the I guess like some of the sensors that everyone always talks about in mobile devices, and doing that in a way that no one's done before. I think that's the stuff that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, so iOS 5 added reminders now, where you can get notifications when you become close to something, or you're leaving a place.
Yeah.
So you foresee that as being something you'll eventually add into like the awareness portion of your app?
That type of stuff has always been really exciting to us. The problem is like when you run those things in the background, it just drains the battery so quickly. And so I think the big hope is that with next generation operating systems for mobile phones, that you'll be able to do this in a way that doesn't drain your battery in 3 hours.
Is that pinging Wi-Fi hotspots to figure out what's around, or how would it do that? Is it just lower power GPS chips?
I think it's a combination of all those things. Like we don't really know what's going to be in the next generation of the hardware. We don't really know like how the how the new OSs are going to actually deliver that location back to you. It's kind of like iOS now. Like you never know where the location comes from, but you just get a fix back from them. So I don't know, but I'm just hoping it's going to be a lot more. Just you'll be able to use it in ways that you haven't been able to use right now.
So talk to me about the deals side of what you've done, because I feel that like the last year it's been just all about the deal sites, right? They have these crazy valuations, and I have friends that have restaurants, and they often talk about how these are completely unvetted customers, and they'll come in there and they're there for the deal and they never come back and they don't tip, and it's just like a horrible experience. And I feel like when I look at your product and look at FourSquare, you have something that most don't, and that is like real intent, and I've been there before. I've spent time at that location. You're kind of helping vet those potential customers, like, and your deals have been awesome. Is that something that you see being a kind of a cornerstone of how you monetize FourSquare?
I think one of the things that we accidentally struck on early on in the FourSquare story is the idea that helping merchants reach out and cater to their most loyal customers was going to be more interesting than their newest customers. And if you look at the FourSquare specials that we started with, like come 5 times and you get this, like bring 5 friends. If you're the mayor of a place, meaning you've been there more than anyone else, like a lot of them were heavily skewed on the loyalty side of things. And I think a lot of the tools that we've already built for merchants, like they can look at the dashboard and say, hey, these are my best customers, or these used to be my best customers, and giving them a way to reach out to those audiences, I think is really powerful. That being said, like we're looking at all the success that a lot of these deal companies have had in driving new customers as well. And we're hearing incidentally from a lot of merchants that when people check in at a coffee shop and they broadcast that to FourSquare, or they broadcast it to Twitter, or they broadcast it to Facebook, that actually it's like a little mini ad impression for that coffee shop, for that coffee truck, and so that's driving customers too. And so we're thinking about ways that we can start to capture some of that, I guess, like some of the storytelling that users are telling their friends, so that we can keep track of, oh, this person is really valuable because they're able to get a lot of people here when they constantly check into your spot.
Do you feel that like that's something you're going to have to figure out on the back end? Like, for example, you know, Clout has created this thing where you get this Clout score, and it can figure out where what keywords you're influential in. You know, is that something you'll eventually develop to where you'll know that, hey, if I check in at this pizza place, I have a lot of, you know, pizza related fans, or I'm big into coffee or tea or whatever it may be, and I can influence those people, so I should get a different deal than someone else?
Yeah, we can see some of that stuff starting to emerge in the data already. Like, we're not explicitly tracking it, but you can see, like, hey, if someone's really like an expert in pizza and this is the place that they're now going to all the time, like that's a bit of signal that we should take and then resurface to other, resurface in different ways to help people benefit from that. So I think, you know, one of the most interesting things that's going on here is, like, now that we've got all these people checking in, and, you know, we're doing more than, you know, about 3 million check-ins per day. I think there's about 800 million check-ins in the database right now. Like, there's lots of amazing stuff that you can do with that data. You can cut it up for heat maps, you can cut it up for recommendation engines, you can cut it up to figure out, like, what are the best coffee shops in all of the East Village or all of San Francisco. And, like, that stuff starts to get really interesting very quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, I know you got to run. New entrepreneurs out there, a lot of them watch this show. They're just getting started with their first startup. You know, you've been through this several times now. Give me a couple lessons learned, like stuff that you're just like, this is absolutely something I would take with my next company. You know, what are your go-to things?
Yeah, I think you know, there's a lot of people that just don't get started because they don't think they have the right skill set, or they want the product to be perfect and bulletproof before they launch anything. I think one of the best things that happened to FourSquare is that Naveen and I gave ourselves a deadline. When we started working on this thing in January of 2009, we said, you know, by the time South by Southwest rolls in, you know, 3 months from now, we have to launch the thing. And so, just like you have a term paper that's due at the end of the semester, like, we set a due date for ourselves. And even though the thing barely worked and, you know, was crashing constantly, it's like, well, this is it. Like, we're flying down on Friday, let's flip the switch on it. And it's one of those things, like, once you get it out there, you can iterate on top of it, you start getting feedback from people. But, you know, flipping the switch the first time is really difficult. And I think the other big piece is, you know, and I've said this a bunch of times, but, like, people look at the FourSquare ride and think it's like this, you know, this big, like, curve of success. When really, like, I think a lot of the success that we're having with the product and with the business is built off of all the failures that have come before. You know, so Dodgeball, even though it was brought to Google, it didn't turn into the thing it was supposed to be. And, you know, some of the ideas that we started at NYU were shelved. You know, like, Dodgeball lived, before NYU in a couple different versions, and none of them really took off. But I think all the lessons that we've learned from those different processes, or different just different projects and different experiments, like, they're all starting to manifest themselves in what we're learning with FourSquare and the way that we can, you know, capitalize on some of the opportunities that we've been given this time around.
How do you approach competition? Like, I know that you've had some serious players come into the space.
Yeah.
You know, Facebook and others. I mean, is that something that, like, you go home at night and you're like, oh my God, like,
no,
these is some big boys, like, jumping in here, you know?
I think it's definitely
not
easy.
Not to say you're not big yourself, but you
are.
But
no, we're in that, like, in the adolescent phase.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely easy to get really stressed out and get distracted by those things. And I think, like, another big lesson and something that we try to pay attention to here is, you know, like, we have a very clear vision of the stuff that we want to build. We know what the product's supposed to look like a year from now, 2 years from now. And, like, that's the only thing that we're looking at. You know, like, we can look at what Google and the Facebooks are doing, and a bunch of the other, you know, smaller guys from, like, a year or so ago, what all those folks are doing, and you very easily get distracted by them. But as long as we just keep focusing on the stuff that we want to do and just don't pay attention to them, I feel like we're better off. You know, like, our product ends up being a little bit more original. We don't get distracted by directions that other folks are going in, and, like, it gives us the opportunity to execute on the stuff that, you know, is really the reason that we started the company to begin with. So.
Awesome. So real quick, you're hiring like crazy. I'm imagining.
Yeah.
I mean, I see you're growing.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to make a hiring plug.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think that you're one of the coolest startups here in New York, and so if there's people out here that are looking for a job, where should they go? Is it just /jobs?
Yeah, it's FourSquare.com/jobs. We have a New York office with about 60 people here, and we have a San Francisco office with about 15 people now.
So what's that going to be based out of San Francisco? Is it more coding, or is it?
Yeah, it's mostly engineers. We have a couple biz dev guys out of there as well. We haven't dropped product people there yet, but we're thinking about it. And, you know, most of this office is product and engineering as well. So this whole half of the room is engineering.
Awesome.
And then as you get down there, you get to more of the biz dev folks. So yeah, hiring as quickly as possible. So always looking for good candidates.
Great. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Cool.